reality and then to formulate economic policies. So, first of all, this is an experience designed to explain macroeconomic concepts, cost, and prices. I thought that using real data would be more attractive for them, and also to learn more about the our real our reality. We see it now in the news, in the internet, everything is related to COVID-19. So regarding the pharmaceutical markets, I'm going to also relate this experience to the analysis of the competence. We know that the amount of revenues generated is huge, more than $1 trillion. Non-prescription drugs amount to more than 9% of total revenues, and generics around 6.3% of total revenues. Also, to discover new drugs and active principles, it's a requirement to invest. Research and development investment amounted to $186 billion in 2019. However, patents have a limited life, only 20 years, and the revenue at risk for patent expiration in 2021 is around $22 billion. So we are also going to analyze the patent role in the development of new substances. We have the reality for the previous 5 years. 120 substances were discovered in US, 58 in Europe, 36 in Japan. So our reality is that we have the number of cases and deaths for my region, for my country, for European Union, for the world, and these figures are increasing and increasing. We have three alternatives. One is vaccination with effective vaccines. The second is the discovery of new substances, and the third is the resource to previous substances that have been applied for other pathologies or illnesses, for example, Ebola, influenza, AIDS, malaria, antiviral drugs. But now there are clinical trials to study the level of efficiency to fight against COVID-19. So I have selected these 9 drugs, and I have propose an analysis of the price and cost for different countries. So, as I said before, the experience was designed for students of political science, but it's also recommendable for students in economics, sociology, business administration. The objectives are the following one: to demonstrate the difference between production cost and final prices, to perceive the difficulty of access to certain treatments depending on the country, and to reflect on what initiatives should be implemented in a context of international emergency. So first of all, students were divided in small groups. I have around 90 students in the first degree of political science. So they were divided in groups of 4 or 5 students, and I will explain later the dynamic of the teaching experience. But afterwards, they shared their results and their recommendations. So we have interactions within groups and interactions between groups. We have different phases for this experience. First, the estimation of the cost of pharmaceutical products. Second, search for information on the retail price of pharmaceutical products. Third, reading and reflection about the pharmaceutical market characteristics. Four, mathematical and statistical exercise, very basic statistic. You know that they are in political science, but they have to learn at least what is mean standard deviation, and development of proposals to improve access to medicines. So in principles, my student would like to jump just directly to the 5th step, but that's impossible. So I wanted them to reflect that it's necessary to become near to the figures, know what they are telling us, and to also understand the characteristic of the pharmaceutical market. So in the first step, we have the 9 drugs, and now in the second and third column, we have the number of doses recommended for standard treatment for COVID. So not for the initial pathology, but for COVID. We have the total treatment cost, which we can see that is quite affordable for most of the drugs, $20, the whole treatment, $31, $4. The one exception is tocilizumab, with the cost rises to $177. And in the final column, we have the cost per day. So this first phase was obtained using data from Panjiva database. So in this database, we have the cost of the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the excipients, the formulation, and the packaging. So we add all the cost and we obtain the final cost, evidently multiplying the dose required per day times the number of days of treatment. Afterwards, we have to look for national database. In Spain, the name is Vademecum. So we have the name of the active principle because it could be commercialized under different brand names. So in this case, students were suggested to choose the cheapest one. So they have to look for these web pages, look for the active principle, and select the price of the brand that was the cheapest one selling this product. So in the final column, it's very interesting. We have the number of active principles that are allowed in this country. So there are huge difference. For example, in United States, where you can find 8 different active principles, but in Bangladesh, you can find a smaller amount, or in Egypt or in Brazil. So this is the first difference. Just due to different legislations, the adaptation of the patents, the laboratory requirements, you don't have the same access to the same number of pharmaceutical products. So you have computed the price of the complete COVID treatment. So this is not the cost, it's the price. In the red rectangle, we have hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, and azithromycin, which are the cheapest one. So the price for the whole treatment is affordable, and we can say, well, taking into account the number of patients, we could provide healthcare attentions to all of them, because perhaps the price would be $18, $19, $5. However, when the severe sofosbuvir, pirfenidone, they are the most expensive. In this case, just for one patient, the price of the treatment could be several thousand of dollars. So there are huge difference among treatments. Now, well, after these 2 phases, which were required a lot of not complicated mathematics, but the use of Excel spreadsheet. So we went to the computer classroom, and I had to give basic indications about the use of the spreadsheet. Now we turn to a more relaxed phase where they were required to read 2 papers, one in Spanish and one in English, because one of the main drawbacks of Spanish students is the low English level. So the competence of one of the competence of all Spanish universities is to understand and express themselves in a foreign language. So that's why I introduced this paper, and afterwards a series of questions. The special characteristics of the pharmaceutical market to compare it with the perfect competitive market, the role of pharmaceutical patents to relate them to the monopoly, and also to the characteristic of a public good. Do you think that in this case, well, the patent is just creating an environment where only the owner of the patent or the person who has hired it can use it? So it's the opposite of a public good. Do you think that this is the recommended environment for us in this case, where we are situation is of healthcare emergency, or patents should be avoided in these special circumstances, just to start reflecting about these characteristics. Also, my students know a lot about mobiles, for example, or computers, and they say, well, this is cheaper or this is more expensive. So they are used that as time passes, the prices is relatively cheaper. However, for the case of pharmaceutical drugs, this is not the case, because the successful drugs is going to include the cost of wastage drugs that have been required in the previous experiences or analysis. So since this is special characteristics, and also just the patent are also being like a fence for poorest populations, because in this case the extension of intellectual property rights could be avoided to this population or these countries. So the technology or the pharmaceutical active principle can be discovered, can be affordable for countries that can hire the patent, but not for other countries. So in the next step, now we are going to compute the average price and the standard deviation for each active principle. So in yellow, we have hydroxychloroquina, chloroquina, and azithromycina. The average price is quite low. However, in purple, we have other four substances which are the most expensive ones. And also we have pirfenidone and sofosbuvir, where the standard deviation is higher than $1,000. So there is a huge disparity among countries. This is a new element of reflection. Now, to differentiate between price and cost, they are required to compute the markup ratio, price minus marginal cost divided by marginal cost. And in this case, we appreciate in yellow that active principles where the markup ratio is the smallest one. However, in red, we have the most expensive ones, in this case for sofosbuvir. So this is going to be, yes, 5 minutes. So there's going to be a clear separation between one countries and others, one drugs, one type of active principles and others. Now they were required to compare the GDP per capita, so they have to look for data in the World Bank database. They didn't like this very much as principles because the information, the levels of the variables are in English, so they have to translate Producto Interior Bruto in Spanish to GDP. But after that, when they are used to the search procedure, they liked it. So they computed the ratio between total price divided by GDP per capita. And we appreciate that in certain principles and certain countries, this ratio is quite high. For example, in Brazil, it can be between 6% and 49%. In Egypt, is approximately 20% of GDP per capita. The final step is to obtain the public expenditure in healthcare. So again, going to the World Bank database and compute the ratio between the total price of the treatment divided by the public healthcare per capita. And in this case, we appreciate difference. For example, in Pakistan, there is huge difference between one treatment and another. But in this case, the price of the treatment can be several times higher than the average expenditure per individual in healthcare. So this is completely crazy in a situation of emergency. So the final step was to make recommendation. Well, one of macroeconomic concepts mostly used is that of economies of scale. So if we produce the biggest amount of one type of product, the average cost is going to be smaller. Well, that's one solution. The other is to allow the production of generic drugs. But above all, we have realized that COVID drugs can be manufactured at very low prices. However, the final price, which is conditioned by the market ratio, gives us huge difference among countries and drugs. So first of all, there could be a process of of free technology transfer among countries. So at least in these special circumstances, there would be no barriers preventing mass productions of these treatments. So in this case, the students have used the spreadsheet, they have used a PowerPoint to share the results. They have also shared the results in the forum of the virtual classroom and also in the classroom. And they have realized that there is a positive externality in health. The health of some of us is good for the health of all. So the final valuation has been very positive for all of them and also for me. That's all. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Cristina, very much for your interesting presentation and for being on time. It's really great.
Thank you.
Okay, as I see that we have quite a good number of participants here, so I would like to ask if you have questions to our presenter. If someone would like to ask, you can write in our public chat, or you can unmute yourself and then ask directly here. Okay, yes, we are waiting for other questions. I would like to ask you, as you mentioned that a huge disparity between countries appears when we talk about cost. So what would be your suggestion or ideas how to reduce that disparity?
Well, the disparities among costs were quite reduced, and in this case, they were driven mainly by transportation cost. The disparities among prices, they were completely crazy, and in this case, they were conditions by the markup imposed by the laboratories or the pharmaceutical brands. So in this case, I don't know if this, because they are organizing lobbies, they have pressure groups or whatever, they have imposed to a certain extent their conditions, and these conditions are being accepted by everybody. But in this case, there should be, a higher, no, I wouldn't say, but power, but organization like the World Health Organization that will require then to stop this process of charging a markup, a huge markup, just the necessary. We have seen that there are in some drugs, azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine, the markup is quite small. So they would require just to mark up just the necessary to survive, like a normal business, but not for profit purpose. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And from the technical point of view, what are the tools you used for statistical data calculation for results? What are the tools you used?
Well, they are in the first degree of political science, so we went to the computer classroom and we only used the spreadsheet Excel. So we copied. They learn how to download data from Panjiva database or from the national database, the Bademekun, or for the World database. But specifically, the cost was the addition of the several parts of the cost: transportation, excipients, formulation, the mean, which is the formula of the mean, the standard deviation, and finally the ratios, the markup ratio and the ratio of the price with respect to GDP per capita. So the mathematics, very, very basic, because take into account that in the Spanish curriculum, students are allowed to let mathematics when they are 13. So when they reach to university, they are 18, and some of them, they have chosen the branch of humanities and literature, and they have mainly forgotten many things about mathematics, and now they start perhaps law, but perhaps business, political science. So you have to be very patient and to just remember basic notion. I think it's a special characteristics of our Spanish curriculum. So
Well, as the results were reached really good, I believe that you are a good professor and you
thank
know
you.
how to motivate students. So
Thank you very much.
thank you very much for your presentation once again. As I cannot see other questions in our chat and nobody is trying to speak, I wish to welcome the second participant and the second presenter as well, Cristina da Milano. She's a president of ECOM, European Center for Cultural Organization and Management. As well, she is the archaeologist specialized in research in the fields of museum education and communication, with particular focus on the topics of lifelong learning and culture as a tool for social integration. And her topic is really different from the first presenter, but not less important. So Cristina is going to present the article Heritage Education as a Strategy for Curricular Innovation and for the 21st Century Competences. So Cristina, the floor is yours and you're welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Vida, for your nice presentation. I'm really happy to be here with all of you and to share this article, which represents the final moment, let's say the output of an activity that we've been carried out in the last, I would say, almost 10 years. When I say we,